was caught off guard when my wife, Maggie, dropped not one, but 2 bombs on me. "Mac, we need to talk," she said when I got home from work. She was still in her accountant's business suit, and I was in my chocolate jumpsuit. "I'm Angus McDougal, and my wife is Margaret Sullivan McDougal. In my opinion, she may seem a little pretentious, but who am I to judge? Her name is Maggie. I'm from Scotland, and she's from Ireland." Looking back, our backgrounds should have been a sign that we weren't exactly right for each other, but damn it, I was shocked from the moment I saw her golden curls, emerald eyes, and gorgeous figure. We first met 10 years ago when we had just finished our military service and went to college together. I was 22, getting a culinary education under the GI Bill program, and she was only 18. Naturally, the accounting education mentioned earlier played an important role in our connection. It was quite unusual how we instantly became close. Perhaps this was due to her experience as a chocolate connoisseur and my passion for creating chocolate treats, sweets, cookies, and everything else related to chocolate. My mother also loved chocolate, as did many other women. The chocolate industry was booming, and the demand for this sweet treat was constant. While most businesses experienced a surge in sales at Christmas, chocolatiers were able to make significant profits throughout the year by capitalizing on holidays such as Valentine's Day, Easter, Independence Day, Memorial Day, Labor Day. None of them compare to Valentine's Day when it comes to the demand for chocolate. As the owner of a small chocolate factory, I see that I have more things to do on Valentine's Day than on any other holiday, even Christmas. This fact never ceases to amaze me. Speaking of surprises, my name is Angus. Yes, Angus, thanks Mom. Needless to say, everyone calls me Mac. Everyone knows me as Mac, even my wife. The only time I hear my real name is when my parents are mad at me. The rest of the time, I'm always Mac. I'm Mac, and my heart stops when Maggie says those terrible words, "We need to talk." Every man knows what kind of cargo is hidden behind this simple phrase. It is a harbinger of mental pain, a signal of impending doom. Sitting at the table, I felt like I was being sentenced. 10 years together, 8 of them happily married, that's what I thought. But now, I knew that my world was about to shatter into a million pieces. I've always thought the same about Maggie. When she spoke, I mentally went over the possible reasons for her upcoming words. Maybe it has to do with problems in bed? This seemed unlikely since we had a strong intimate relationship, frequent and satisfying meetings several times a week. Money? It didn't make sense either because I was earning a solid income, almost $250,000 after accounting for all expenses. Everything was going smoothly for us. With a total income of almost $355,000 a year, we were financially secure. There was no shortage of love either. I adored her with every fiber of my being. But had she stopped feeling the same way about me? Just last week, we discussed starting a family. Lost in her thoughts, she brought me back to reality by handing me an envelope from Manila. As I sat down at the kitchen table, "Maggie, please tell me that's not what I'm thinking," I begged, looking into her eyes. Her expression was a mask of calm, betraying no hint of emotion. "I'm sorry, Mac," she said softly. "I should have discussed this with you earlier, but I want to get a divorce." "Why?" I managed to keep my voice steady despite the excitement raging inside me. "It's hard," she avoided my gaze, her words trailing off. "You found someone else," I stated, stating a fact rather than asking a question, surprised by the lack of anger. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "And for how long?" I asked, trying to understand my own reaction. I had to stand there, furious, pacing back and forth and hurling insults at her. I had to confront the man she left me for. I should have felt something other than a complete stupor. 8 months, she said. I closed my eyes, trying to digest the betrayal. 8 months, I repeated. You've been cheating on me for 8 months now, and the first thing I hear about it is that you want a divorce. I shrugged, resigned to the upcoming legal battle. Since alienation of affection is not welcome in California, I have limited options, she said, shaking her head. Your business is yours, not mine. The house belongs to me by inheritance from my grandparents, but I'm giving you a few days to leave. As soon as you find a place to live, I will demand minimum alimony until I get married again, nothing superfluous, I sighed. Do I even know him? I finally asked. If you harm him, you will face imprisonment, she said, unnecessary, although I certainly had the desire to harm him. I also didn't want to endanger my business. I understood that perfectly well, but I thought I had the right to know who had been sabotaging me for the last 8 months. I just shrugged my shoulders. Reginald Pennington, she said confidently, the bastard. This revelation became the number 2 bomb. I had despised him before, but now I was really furious. I closed my eyes tightly and took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. Reginald Pennington, the epitome of privilege, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and old money, not to mention his snobbish attitude and disturbing, bigoted views. I tried to warn Maggie about him after our dinner meeting where we discussed our common charity work. She dismissed my concerns, insisting that he was harmless. Harmless as a venomous snake. We first encountered him at a local charity event, where his true nature had already been revealed. I was alarmed by the way he was looking at Maggie. He looked at me with contempt and at her with undisguised desire. Barely able to contain my anger, I plucked up the courage and met Maggie's gaze again. I guess there's nothing I can do about it, I remarked with a casual shrug. Deep down, I wished the situation hadn't deteriorated to such an extent, but I had to come to terms with reality. Maggie tried to comfort me with a sad smile, but I saw right through her. My thoughts were now focused on developing a plan. In any case, I will not dispute the divorce since everything is as you say. Before signing the papers, I will review them with my lawyer. You got it? I said. She nodded. I wouldn't expect anything less, Mac. Just so you know, it's not about what you did or didn't do. Reginald and I are just communicating on a deeper level. I love you, but I love him too. I'm truly sorry that it ended like this, Mac, Maggie said. What a ridiculous excuse. She was in love with his wealth. His family is extremely wealthy. At the charity ball we went to, I saw him dancing in a tight circle with Maggie. When they broke up, I couldn't help but notice how he cleaned himself up after she returned to our table. It was obvious to me that he couldn't satisfy her in bed. I almost didn't notice that he had a rouse under his tight trousers until he adjusted them. I had to hold back my laughter when I realized that Maggie was content with someone much smaller than me, but I decided not to create problems and just said, I'm sorry. After our conversation, she handed me a manila envelope. You'll be officially served with a summons tomorrow, Mac. I'll meet you and my lawyer at Tim's office. This is only a small part of my hopes for a settlement, she said. She mentioned Tim Grayson, my longtime friend and legal advisor since the founding of the McDougal Chocolate Factory. Let's skip the alimony and consider the issue resolved. Reggie is rich. You don't need my financial support, do you? I spoke. I knew it was a stretch, but damn it, she owed me. If she had agreed, then maybe I wouldn't have had to implement the plan that was looming in my head. But no, I needed something more. After all, I've spent a decade of my life with her. When she bluntly stated that our entire relationship was a waste of time, it ignited something in me. I looked at the amount of alimony offered and raised an eyebrow. In response, she asked for $2,200 a month in alimony for a maximum of 2 years or until she finds another one, whichever comes first. This was almost half of my monthly income after covering expenses and paying my employees. Despite this, I had enough savings in my personal account to feed myself. After thinking about it, I agreed. I think it will all be worth it in the end, I said with a shrug, having made my decision. I began to pack my things in the evening of the same day. I left, packing a suitcase and a bag with clothes and toiletries. I also packed my huge collection of music CDs, ranging from Marty Robbins to Metallica and Mozart. She covered a wide variety of genres, including a bit of Sir Mix-a-Lot just for fun. I loaded everything into my car, a Mustang Fastback nicknamed Bullet, and hit the road. An hour later, I was on my way, dialing Kat's number on my mobile phone as I went. I've just been kicked out, and tomorrow morning, Tim's office will hand me the divorce papers. Maggie considers herself renewed, at least in her imagination, I informed Kate. I laughed mockingly, bitterness seeping into my voice. Really? She was as shocked as I was. "Yeah, I'm going to spend the night at the Holiday Inn until I figure this out," I replied. "No way. Get your ass over to me right now, Mr. Mack," Kate said, strict with me as she likes to say. "Good, yes ma'am," I replied. After finishing my conversation with Katrina Monroe, my manager at the chocolate factory, I couldn't help but chuckle. She reminded me of Aisha Tyler, but in a younger version. At 6 feet tall, she was a Nubian goddess whom we all affectionately called Kat. Her boyfriend, Darius Jackson, was a guitarist in a rock band, which added to his coolness in my eyes. Shaking my head regretfully, I realized that I would see them both next time I plan to come back, sometime next week, spending a few nights at Kat's in her guest room. While Darius was kind enough to let me stay longer, I knew I needed to find my own place. With the money I had in the bank, I could probably buy a house, but the 50-50 division of the common property has not yet occurred, so most likely I will have to rent an apartment before I can afford my own house again. As I approached Kat's house, my thoughts were suddenly interrupted. Her boyfriend visited her only occasionally, but he pressured Kat to move in with him in Los Angeles. Despite his insistence, Kat remained firm in her decision to expect more serious commitments from him, such as an offer. At that time, at the age of 32, being in great shape and being a millionaire, I discovered that I was betrayed and devastated by the woman I once loved and married, my future ex-wife, a deceitful gold digger. I drove up to Kat's house and parked my car next to her little Ford Fusion. It looks like her car was scared of my bullet. The powerful V8 engine roared when I turned it off. Grabbing my suitcase from the trunk, I watched Kat leave the house dressed in shorts and a t-shirt that left no room for fantasy. Her curves were mesmerizing, but I quickly banished all inappropriate thoughts. I closed the trunk and walked over to Kat, who silently let me in. Her expression expressed disbelief and other conflicting emotions. I realized that I was still in a state of shock. As soon as I crossed the threshold of the house, I dropped my suitcase and fell to my knees. The full weight of what had happened finally hit me, and I tried to shut it out as long as possible. Suddenly, everything that I had been holding inside of me spilled out, overwhelming me. I couldn't hold back the flow of emotions. Tears were streaming down my face, and my body was shaking with sobs. Kat knelt down next to me, and I felt the comforting embrace of two gentle hands. I clung to her tightly. Her presence supported me and did not allow me to completely withdraw into myself. "It's okay, it's going to be okay, Mac," she reassured me, but I shook my head, unable to believe her words. Yes, I indulged in self-pity, now I can admit it. In response, she pulled my head to her generous chest, and at that moment, I felt a feeling of love. Maybe it was the love of a good friend, but at least I felt like someone cared about me. She helped me up, and together, she was walking, and I was stumbling. We went into the living room, where I collapsed on her big leather sofa. While checking her phone, she came across a viral video of Darius kissing another girl. "You must be joking," she exclaimed loudly, with her mouth open in shock, looking at her phone. I followed her gaze to see what was upsetting her. I was shocked to see Darius passionately kissing a woman in public. It was not just a friendly kiss but a full-fledged kissing session. "Is there something in the water?" I mumbled, unable to comprehend what I saw. As I watched Kat's relationship crumble before my eyes, memories of my failed marriage flashed through my mind. "There must be some kind of cheating drug in the water," Kat growled, her anger palpable. Her gaze made me uneasy. "That jerk," she continued, her voice seething with rage. "He told me that he doesn't even like women like that." I listened to her vent her anger on him for what seemed like an eternity until finally, she turned to me and burst into tears. Without hesitation, I hugged her, offering her the same support she had given me before. While she was crying, I couldn't help but notice the similarities in her bloodshot eyes, two suffering souls. Despite the seriousness of the moment, she managed to laugh sadly, and I couldn't help but smile through my tears. "Look at us," she remarked, "two peas in a pod." I laughed softly, grateful that Maggie had at least spared me the humiliation of a public breakdown. "That bastard did it for everyone to see," I shrugged. "I'm sorry, Kat." "It's not your fault," I said, hugging her tightly. She reached for her cell phone. "Excuse me while I hit the scammer on the head," she said, and I nodded in understanding as she dialed his number. "Hello, Darius?" Yes, we've seen the video. Matt is here with me, his wife kicked him out. He's going to stay with me for a while until he finds a new place. No, it's not a problem, she said, talking to him. I witnessed how you entered into an intimate relationship with this woman. She paused, rolled her eyes, and then motioned for me to listen, putting her finger to her lips and turning on the speakerphone. I'm sorry, Kat. It's not a problem, he continued, his voice full of desperation. Yes, I'm talking to you. I witnessed how you entered into an intimate relationship with this woman, she said, firmly. As he continued to beg and humiliate himself, it became evident that he didn't deserve to be in reserve. Kat didn't let him finish and said in a firm tone, Well, Darius, we're done. I'll arrange for your things to be delivered to you in Los Angeles. I don't want to mess with you, but baby, he began with desperation in his voice. No, you lost the right to call me baby when you kissed that woman on national television. I will not tolerate such behavior. It's over between us. It's over, remember that. Goodbye, Darius. I hope this woman was worth betraying me. Without giving him a chance to explain, Kat hung up and blocked his number. She turned to me with a knowing smile. Well, that's it. Zero tolerance, I nodded in agreement. Cheaters don't deserve a second chance, I replied. So, what's the divorce plan? Kat asked, her tone fierce. I swear, if she tries to take everything you have from you, I'll knock the wind out of her. Kat's colorful expressions always delighted me. When I read her phrase, a smile appeared on my face. It was strange, but it was true. She asked for $2,200 a month in alimony, most likely to speed up her plans for remarriage. But other than that, the agreement she proposed seemed quite reasonable. I shrugged my shoulders. I have already shed all the tears and moved on to the stage of accepting my grief from the divorce. Well, maybe not quite acceptance. To tell the truth, I wanted revenge. With a clear mind, a plan of retaliation began to form in my head. The more I thought about it, the more sense it made. She must be really serious about this jerk. Did she reveal his identity to you? Kat asked. Yes, and you won't believe who it is. It's Reginald Pennington, I said with a laugh. Kat's eyes widened. Oh no, I would never have thought that Maggie was after money, she replied. I hadn't thought about it either until now. It looks like she tricked everyone. Her parents never approved of me, I said sadly. I'm sure they influenced her decision, even if only slightly. Okay, I admit, for a moment, I let myself get offended, but to hell with them, Kat shrugged, noticing my thoughts. I can see the gears turning, Mac. What's on your mind? Kat always knew when I was deeply focused. She often observed this at work when I had to fix problems in a store or factory. A revenge plan of epic proportions, I smiled serenely, assuring her. Just trust me on this. It will leave an indelible mark on them for the rest of their lives. Kat's laughter filled the room when I shared my bold plan with her. She couldn't contain her amusement, calling me crazy in fits of laughter. We stayed up late into the night, sipping beer and working out a strategy for the upcoming wedding in 3 months. Our laughter echoed around the room as we considered our next steps. I made the decision not to fight the divorce, knowing that they would most likely get married within 6 months of its completion. I was ready for this opportunity, and if I could maintain a polite relationship with Maggie, and maybe even with Reginald, I would be able to attend the wedding without making a scene. It was after midnight when I brought my suitcase and bag into the guest room. I informed Kat that I would go to the office in the morning to meet with Tim and sign the divorce papers. She was sympathetic to this, offering to maintain order until I arrived or give me the opportunity to take a day off if I needed it. I slept surprisingly peacefully, perhaps because of the moderate amount of beer I drank, or perhaps because of the insidious plan I came up with to make Reginald Pennington and Maggie's wedding unforgettable. Regardless of the reason, I was happy with our idea. Waking up early in the morning, I was greeted with a grin by the aroma of scrambled eggs and bacon cooking on the stove, which only increased my excitement. A fresh cup of coffee only increased my anticipation for the day ahead. I racked my brain, trying to remember the last time Maggie cooked breakfast for me, but it seemed like a distant memory. Instead, Kat took on the role of temporary neighbor and chef. After a quick shower, I put on a t-shirt and jeans, deciding to skip the shopping trip after an awkward meeting with Tim. Joining Kat in the kitchen, I greeted her with a smile, sitting on a bar stool in her cozy kitchen corner. "Good morning, Kat," I said cheerfully. She returned my dazzling smile, noting that I looked better than the night before. "Thanks to you and the beer," I replied with a grateful nod. I couldn't help but laugh at Kat's infectious laughter. "Here's some scrambled eggs and bacon for you. Are you going to work after meeting Tim?" "What is it?" she asked, putting a plate and a mug of coffee in front of me. "Thank you, Kat." "No, I think I'll take the day off. I'm not sure how I'll feel after signing the papers with Maggie and her lawyer," I replied with a shrug. "But later, I'll buy you lunch and tell you about the details," I promised. Kat nodded. "You're the best, Mac. I'm so grateful that I'm coming to her from you. If I saw this woman without your support, it would probably be very hard for me." "That's one thing I admire about you, darling," I said with a smile. "You are the most loyal person I know." "I love you too, my friend," she replied with a sweet smile. As I stood up and hugged her, Kat was only slightly shorter than me, so our bodies pressed together as we hugged in solidarity. "Hey, we both had former cheaters." "I'm glad you're doing well," I said, hugging her to me before letting go. "At least we didn't cheat on each other, that would be too predictable," she laughed, and I couldn't help but laugh. It was definitely a strange coincidence that we both found out about it on the same day. I tried to play the guy from The Simpsons comics, knowing that Kat would understand me, and she responded with a snide laugh and a playful slap on the shoulder. "You're right, Mac, this is a huge coincidence, which makes the idea of deception seem even more plausible." "You and your conspiracy theories," I grinned playfully, giving her a playful grin. "The truth is somewhere nearby," I teased. Kat gave me a skeptical look before we finished tidying up, and she offered me a spare key to her apartment. "It was meant for Darius, but I think you'll need it more," she explained with a smile. Gratefully, I hugged her warmly. "I'll find my own place soon, don't worry. I'll leave you alone in a few days," I assured her. "Take your time, Mac," she replied. "Trust me, it's not a problem. I'd rather you were around so I could look out for you." "Who knows what kind of trouble you could get into," Kat said. "My parents went through a divorce, so I understand how my father felt when my mother left." "I'm not taking my eyes off you," she continued. "Okay, Mom," I said with a grin, and she playfully patted me on the shoulder in response. I found out about what happened and how her mom struggled with her mental health. Although she did not cheat on Kat's father, her personality and mental health issues led her to alcohol and eventually to divorce. I didn't know all the details, but the situation wasn't as complicated as my own, but her father had a hard time. I'll tell you a little bit about our relationship. Kat and I have been friends for 20 years. She is 2 years older than me and looked after me at school when we were younger. At that time, I was smaller than other boys, and I was often bullied. Kat, who was already taller than most of the guys, was like a defender for me, and no one dared to joke with her. She wasn't just protecting me, she showed me how to assert myself and stand up for what I believe in. When my family didn't want to fight for me, she taught me to play dirty when it was necessary. At a young age, she learned to stand up for herself. By the time we reached adolescence, I had finally surpassed her in height by just 1 inch. My last growth spurt was in my sophomore year, while she had already stopped growing. She is 6 feet tall, while I tower over her by 6 feet 1 inch. Despite the fact that we have both gained weight since our youth, we both remain in good physical shape. She was a talented hurdler on the track and field team, while I was more involved in baseball. Thanks to her abilities, Kat got a scholarship to the University of California, but my baseball abilities did not allow me to get a scholarship. Instead, I joined the Army and then used my GI Bill to continue my education. Shortly before marrying Maggie, I opened a chocolate shop, and Kat, who had received an MBA, applied for the position of manager. Recognizing her qualifications, I did not hesitate to hire her. At first, I couldn't afford to pay her much, but as information about our store spread, the business flourished. We were overloaded with business, but I was lucky to have a team of wonderful people working for me, among whom Kat was the best. A year later, I entrusted her with the management of the business while Maggie and I were on our long-awaited honeymoon. To my delight, Kat worked smoothly all this time, and by the end of the first year, we were able to repay the bank loan and pay everyone a well-deserved salary increase. By the third year, my store had turned into a small factory with a large kitchen, and our success was growing exponentially. I have successfully signed contracts for the supply of cocoa beans and presented unique exotic blends. By the fifth year of operation, we were fulfilling special orders for sweets all over California. Despite the lucrative franchise offers, I remained firm in my decision to maintain the independence of the business. As a result, we switched to fulfilling only special orders. When I was offered millions to sell the company, my employees and I refused the deal. They were only willing to work for me, and I couldn't stand the thought of losing such a dedicated team. Ultimately, their dedication strengthened my decision to keep the business in my hands. I decided to keep my business small, with only 20 employees, focusing on quality and making money. But this decision eventually led to a conflict with my relatives when Maggie's father expressed interest in buying the business and expanding it. I respectfully declined, explaining that I preferred to keep a small family atmosphere. He strongly disagreed, insisting that expansion was necessary to achieve significant financial success. Despite his objections, I remained firm in my decision. I mentioned casually that I'm already making decent money, but I don't want to become as greedy as he is. In the morning, after breakfast, Kat and I parted ways. She went to work, and I went to Tim's office. When I arrived, we immediately got down to business. Maggie was running late, so we spent time chatting until she finally showed up. The atmosphere changed as soon as she entered, evidenced by the presence of her lawyer and another familiar face, Dickie Pennington. At the sight of his smug expression, I felt a surge of irritation, ignoring his attempt at a handshake. I focused my attention on Maggie. "Let's just get this over with," I said. Tim carefully analyzed the proposed division of property. Since my business was not funded by her or her family and the house was donated by her late grandparents, they were not considered common property and belonged to both of us. My Mustang, which I was restoring back in high school, clearly belonged to me. I was shocked when Tim raised the issue of the divorce so that she would marry Reginald Pennington. Mrs. McDougal hesitated before answering. Tim continued to press her, and her lawyer, who seemed to be imitating Gloria Allred, leaned over and whispered something to Maggie in a soft voice. She reluctantly replied, "Yes," looking ashamed. Tim never addressed her as Mrs. McDougal and asked about their upcoming wedding plans. As the conversation heated up, Maggie, Reggie Boy, and Gloria Jr. huddled together whispering to each other. Taking advantage of the moment, Tim leaned over to me and mentioned alimony. I just nodded and smiled back. He seemed determined not to pay her anything. After all three men had finished talking, Maggie returned to Tim. "Once the divorce is finalized, we can start planning the wedding in earnest," she said. Tim nodded in agreement. "And if these reports are correct," he added, pulling out a detailed financial report on Reggie Boy, "Mr. Pennington is actually worth about $1 billion, even without taking into account his numerous real estate and cars." "So, Mrs. McDougal, my question is this. Why should an honest and hardworking man like your husband pay you alimony if you can just ask Mr. Pennington for money whenever you want?" Maggie reached for the lawyer and Pennington again, and Tim shot me a quick glance. I answered him with a gesture. While the three of them discussed their next steps, they came out of the embrace. The lawyer turned to me with a serious expression on her face. "What are you offering as fair compensation?" she asked. "Well, she can take all the furniture," I replied. The whispers were quieter this time, but eventually, they turned and looked at Tim. "Him?" "I agree," the lawyer said. I was relieved that I wouldn't have to pay child support, but I was disappointed that I didn't get any of the furniture. The lawyer made the necessary changes to the divorce papers, which were signed by all of us except Pennington, and the filing was completed on the same day. Immediately after the lawyer left, as I was walking back to the car, Maggie and the little dummy came up to me. "Angus, old man, I hope you don't mind," he said, holding out his hand to shake. That was the last straw. I grabbed his hand and squeezed it with all my strength, making him howl in pain. "Call me Angus again, Reginald, and I'll make your life a misery to you. I'm Mr. McDougal, do you understand?" By the time I finished speaking, he was already on his knees, and the bones of his arms were grinding. "Yes, Mr. Mac," he choked. "McDougal, please let me go." Genuine fear showed on his face. I let go of his hand before any complications arose, and he breathed a sigh of relief. "This is for calling me Angus," I said calmly. As for this woman, no hard feelings. I smiled, turned around, and headed for my car. I felt a sense of liberation since the divorce would be over soon. I felt relieved that I would not have to pay alimony. "Oh, that reminds me of something, Maggie. Before I leave, I need to return Grandma's wedding ring," I said, holding out my hand. Maggie gave me a puzzled look, then took off her wedding and engagement rings from her finger and handed them to me. "Thank you," I said with a smile and put both rings in my pocket, then headed to my car. I started the powerful V8 engine, shifted into gear, squeezed out the clutch, and stepped on the gas. The tires screeched as I pulled out of the parking lot. I rarely allowed myself to do such reckless things, but I was determined to tell the lovebirds about it. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I saw that this cretin was standing in shock, wiping his bruised arm. A satisfied grin spread across my face as I stepped on the gas pedal and left some rubber on the asphalt. When I arrived at the store, I was greeted with smiles and hugs by Kat and the rest of the team. They all expressed their condolences, and I graciously accepted their wishes. After quickly thanking them, I firmly and colorfully told them to get back to work. I felt great despite paying for a lawyer, legal fees, and giving up furniture I didn't need. I have successfully gone through a peaceful divorce. "Come on, Kat," I said cheerfully, "let's have lunch." I took us away in my favorite car, and Kat enjoyed the trip immensely. The engine rumbled under the hood, its power radiating like an aura of strength. While we were eating and laughing, two old friends sharing our meal, our bond formed, and a new sense of solidarity developed through the pain of betrayal. I couldn't understand how I could completely ignore her infidelity. "I still can't believe I didn't know she was cheating on me at all," I hissed, finally admitting my own ignorance about Maggie. "I must have been very stupid." "No, Mac, you were in love. Love can blind us," she reassured. Kat's smile was warm as she reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand. No matter what, I couldn't help but smile back. "Thank you, Kat," I said sincerely, squeezing her hand back, silently expressing my gratitude for everything she had done for me, both professionally and in my personal life. Kat was not just an office manager and friend to me. She became an integral part of my life from when I was a little kid at school until now, when I became a man striving for success in business. I relied on her support and guidance. I chose her as the most suitable and qualified candidate out of all the applicants. "You don't need to thank me, the reward at the end of the year is enough gratitude," I assured her. She smiled back, making me giggle. "Consider it done," I added, smiling when I met her dark blue eyes. At first, she looked away, a faint blush coloring her caramel-colored cheeks. I was taken aback for a moment but quickly pulled myself together, trying not to give myself away. "She's a friend," I reminded myself, feeling nervousness rising inside me. She had also recently suffered a loss. Throughout our long friendship, I had never viewed Kat in a romantic light. She had always been just a friend to me, even despite her stunning beauty. Of course, I was always aware of her striking appearance, for example when I saw her at her house the night before. Any American man with red blood would be attracted to an attractive woman like her. But this time, there was a shift in my perception. Reflecting on our conversation, I realized that I was not emotionally prepared for what had just happened. After finishing lunch, we quickly moved on to lighter topics. After dropping her off at the store, she mentioned that she would see me at home. Feeling out of place, I decided to go to Bluffs and look at the vast expanses of the Pacific Ocean. That's where I made the decision. I looked at the ring on my left hand, the symbol of 8 years of marriage, and took it off. I found Maggie's engagement ring in my pocket, a painful reminder of our failed relationship. Then I took out my grandmother's wedding ring and held all 3 rings in my hand, feeling the full weight of their meaning. Just seeing them together made me feel sick, which was a tangible manifestation of the emotional shock I was experiencing. I returned Grandma's wedding ring to my pocket and then stepped back and threw our wedding rings into the ocean as far as I could. The ring shimmered in the rays of the sun, floated over the rocks, and disappeared into the crashing waves below. For me, it was a symbolic act, the last farewell to a short-lived marriage. Although the divorce process was still ongoing, this gesture was necessary for my peace of mind and to pave the way for a new beginning. Thus, I officially ended my marriage, but I didn't give up on my plan of revenge on Maggie and Reginald. The words from the song Violence and Bloodshed sounded in my head. Payback is a thing, and I will pay for everything. The thought of Scott Columbus on drums, Eric Adams singing, Joey DeMaio on bass, and Ross the Boss on guitar spurred my resolve. Reggie will pay for taking my wife away from me, and my wife will pay for her betrayal. Some may call me vindictive and old-fashioned. I just tell them to walk 20 miles in my shoes before passing judgment. 3 months later, everything was settled, our joint accounts were divided equally, and Kat and I lived together as roommates and got along great. My colleagues didn't pay attention to our relationship. The real shock came when we received wedding invitations in the mail one evening. Maggie, as it turned out, wasn't joking. The wedding was scheduled just a month after the final divorce papers were signed. I grinned along with Kat, realizing the excitement ahead of us. "Okay, let's do it," I said mischievously, leading us to Costco. Finding a caterer for the wedding turned out to be an easy task. A few months ago, he showed interest in working with us, and now I was determined to give him another chance. This time, I would coordinate all the details myself. I was amazed that Maggie would be dressed in white, and Reggie Boy in his formal navy suit. Wanting to add a touch of mischief, a few nights before the ceremony, I visited the supplier and replaced the chocolate cake mix with my own recipe. Grinning mischievously, I replaced the mixture with a special chocolate mixture that was supposed to make Maggie and Reggie Boy's wedding a truly unforgettable event for everyone present. And no, it wasn't poison, just a little surprise to brighten up the celebration. My actions could be compared to a sophisticated school prank executed with grace, but I was determined to take revenge. I endured their ridicule for 8 long months before they brought me the divorce papers. Although she was surprisingly friendly during the divorce process, all I was left with was a broken heart. But they will have to pay for this broken heart. I was aware of their every move, and she couldn't help but laugh when I informed her that Operation Mud had taken place. The invitation even included a reception. The real excitement was about to begin. On the morning of the wedding, Kat and I took a shower at the same time, but not together. Despite the fact that we had become close over the past few months, we both hesitated to enter into a romantic relationship. Personally, I was afraid of jeopardizing our friendship by crossing that line. Thank God Kat had installed tankless water heaters. Dressed in an Armani suit, I waited anxiously in the living room for Kat to finish packing. "Do I look presentable?" I asked nervously. When I turned to face her, I was completely mesmerized. I was faced with an exciting sight that is difficult to convey in words. Kat was wearing an emerald green dress that accentuated all her curves. The fabric glistened, hugging her figure and seemed almost unwilling to let go. Shoulder-length hair framed her flawless features perfectly, and her crimson lips lent charm to her already captivating appearance. Her emerald green eyeshadow matched the dress perfectly. She wore 1-inch heels, which made us seem the same height. Her toned calves were accentuated by low-heeled shoes. The top of the dress barely contained her ample bust, giving me a glimpse of her caramel-colored back as she whirled around herself. "Good God, you look amazing," I was able to say, finally finding my voice. She flashed a perfect smile in response. "Thanks, Mac. You look damn good yourself," I said, feeling my cheeks flush as we walked out the door. The trip to the church was accompanied by the ironic melody of Billy Idol's song White Wedding playing on the radio. When we pulled into the parking lot, all eyes turned to us, and the bouncer announced our arrival with a loud roar. All the guests gathered on the street were from the upper strata of society, people with old money, which made me even more excited. When we handed our invitations to the intimidating figure at the door, I couldn't help but chuckle at the term bouncer being applied to him. It turned out that this was one of Reggie Boy's trusted guards who always accompanied him at public events. It was obvious that Pennington had made enemies over the years of his questionable business practices, so guards like him were necessary. This did not come as a surprise to me. Reggie Boy's family believed in the do unto others what they don't do to you mentality, their own twisted version of the golden rule. They seemed to firmly believe that whoever had the most money could set their own rules. Judging by the contemptuous looks with which the snobby elite greeted us, it was clear that they were not very well liked. I looked with even more confidence at the events unfolding on this beautiful day. When we took our seats on the bench, I quietly leaned over to Kat and reminded her to avoid chocolate at the reception. She laughed softly and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. The ceremony dragged on, a typical Catholic wedding that tested my ability to stay conscious despite my best efforts. Reggie looked very attractive in his suit, which compounded my growing disdain for him. He once served as an officer in the Navy but decided to leave the service and go into business with his family. As he waited impatiently for Maggie to walk down the aisle, his Annapolis ring sparkled and shimmered. The wedding march sounded in the air, and now she appeared, accompanied by her arrogant father. Memories of her own wedding came flooding back to her, and her father's disapproving look was still fresh in her mind. But now, seeing the pride on the man's face as he watched his daughter marry a man of their social standing, I felt a desire for revenge. Despite the temptation to get into a fight with him, I decided to hold back. I won't go into the tedious details of the wedding vows she ignored the first time or the ring exchange tainted by her affair with that jerk or anything else. When we arrived at the reception, I gracefully congratulated them both, receiving an Oscar, an Emmy, a Tony, and a Golden Globe for Best Actor at the same time. Kat would undoubtedly have won the Best Actress nomination. Maggie's betrayal felt like a betrayal of all of us who worked for me and considered her a beloved friend. Reggie teased me with the name Angus, but I tried to keep my composure and not let my anger get the better of me. It took a lot of effort for me not to vent my rage and cause him physical pain, but I restrained myself and just acknowledged his victory. In the end, the better one won. I reached out and hugged a slightly shocked Kat, imprinting a passionate kiss on her. Kat hesitated for a moment before answering. Readily, at that moment, in front of Reggie and Maggie, I confessed my love to Kat with a deep kiss. It was a magical moment when our tongues intertwined and our arms wrapped around each other. Kat looked at Reggie and Maggie after we pulled away, confirming that the best man had indeed won. She even winked as she completed the deal. The happy couple stood with their mouths open in disbelief, and we all grinned. We took our seats at the reception and tasted the most delicious lobster for dinner. It was damn delicious. But the real fun began when the wedding cake was brought out. Reggie and Maggie held a cake-cutting ceremony, after which they solemnly smashed it on their faces. Everyone burst out laughing and lined up to get a piece for themselves. We decided to wait for the end of the line, knowing that it would be a damn interesting show. And of course, it was. The chaos started as soon as we got to the cake. The bride, like no one else, let out a loud fart that echoed through the hall. Without giving in to her, the groom followed her example and let out his own loud fart. I couldn't help but laugh and exclaimed loudly, "You are justified." This caused a few laughs from the snobbish guests around us, but few people knew that they would not have escaped the awkwardness either. Maggie's face contorted in surprise, a gurgling sound escaped from her mouth, which was quickly followed by an expression of horror. Reginald wrinkled his nose at the unpleasant smell and made a gurgling sound. They exchanged startled glances as farts and gurgles reached the rest of the guests. Maggie and Reggie rushed away as fast as they could, leaving a trail of brown liquid dripping from under her dress. Reggie frantically tried to hide the growing brown mark on the back of his immaculate blue trousers as he and Maggie raced to the toilet. Kat and I quickly headed for the exit, trying to stifle laughter, in search of a quiet place to sit down. But soon, the laughter got the better of us. Tears streamed down our faces as we struggled to contain our laughter, almost falling in half from each burst of fun. "Oh, my God, Mac!" Kat gasped between fits of laughter, clutching her stomach. I joined her, laughing as hard as she did, unable to contain the absurdity of the moment. "Didn't I use too much?" I asked in between bursts of laughter, tears streaming down my face. "And how fast does this stuff work?" She grinned back. "It says on the boxes at Costco that it works well, but don't overdo it," I added. Our laughter gradually subsided as I giggled. "How many boxes did you pour into the cake mix?" "What?" she asked, clearly surprised. "That's it," I replied with a serene smile, which made Kat burst out laughing again. I decided to arrange the Pennington wedding by adding a powdered chocolate-flavored laxative to the boxes of cake mix prepared by the suppliers. I emptied most of the boxes of cake mix and replaced it with laxative so that the cake and cupcakes would have a strong effect. I also mixed a little laxative into the usual cake mix to balance the strength. But I was surprised at how quickly it turned out. It was the perfect finishing touch to my plan. That evening, when I visited the supplier, I made an appointment with him to sign a contract for the supply of chocolate produced at my factory. He had contacted me a few months earlier, and I assured him that I would keep an eye on developments. I explained that we had some delays due to the illnesses of my team members, but now that we were back at work, I was able to provide him with samples. While presenting the samples, I noticed a greedy expression in his eyes, as if he expected to get exactly what he wanted. During a tour of his establishment, he proudly showed me the kitchen and mentioned that they were engaged in the Pennington wedding, which I already knew about. He didn't know that the bride was actually my unfaithful, money-hungry ex-wife. I pretended to be polite, but as soon as he delegated his staff for the day after our handshake, he retired to his office. He promised to prepare the contract documents and inform Tim and me as soon as they were ready, but it seems he completely forgot about the contract in the chaotic days after the wedding. As soon as the guests left and I left his office, I headed for the back door leading to the kitchen. I replaced the powdered cake mix with powdered chocolate laxative and left quickly, making sure the kitchen door was securely locked and that I hadn't left any boxes. Captain Drake taught us the importance of leaving no trace, and I still remember that lesson from my time in the service. I heard that he has since left the Army and became a professor of history at the University of California. By the wedding day, all evidence of my escapade had been erased, leaving no connection with the super sweet cake. Only Kat and I knew about this idea, and she remained silent. When Kat and I returned to our seat, she looked at me with a serious expression on her face. "Mac, as for that kiss," she began, "I know I may have crossed the line, but you looked so beautiful, and I couldn't resist." I intervened in the conversation by expressing my thoughts. She gently put her finger to my lips. "Let me finish, baby," she said softly. "This kiss was the best in my life. You're a good man and a great catch," she paused, blushing slightly. "I want to say that I think we would be very good together." I moved closer to her and pressed my lips to hers, savoring the moment when our mouths met. Her lips softly parted, inviting my tongue into an intimate dance of our kiss. It was a tender and affectionate moment that made me realize how much I missed. When we finally pulled away from each other, our eyes met, and I felt that there was a mutual sense of connection between us. "I think we'd be good together," I said, breaking the silence. She smiled back, and I realized there was only one way to find out. We both knew what was going to happen when we entered the room, and our lips met again in a slow and passionate embrace. I slowly took off the straps of her dress, exposing her delicate skin, continuing to kiss her. At that moment, our bodies joined in a beautiful expression of love and desire. It was an incredible experience. But some may wonder why I chose this particular way of organizing meals. The problem arose when the owner of the restaurant started pestering Kat during their first meeting to discuss a possible business collaboration. After Kat responded to his advances with a well-deserved slap in the face, she advised him not to work with him. The situation changed when they were chosen to organize the Pennington wedding. I saw this as a chance to solve two problems at once. The aftermath of the infamous Brown wedding spread like wildfire in the media. News agencies wasted no time broadcasting the chaos that had ensued. Images of the bride, groom, and guests frantically rushing to the toilet were dotted on screens and in newspapers. I invited all my friends from the store to Kat's house to witness the unfolding spectacle. Although our presence was not captured on camera, it was no secret that we were there. We couldn't help but laugh as we watched the privileged elite running to the toilets in panic, as if their lives depended on it. Of course, many rich, elitist people were extremely humiliated by the footage in which they were trying to cope with an unpleasant mess. The only people I sympathized with were the cleaners who had to deal with the consequences. Shortly after the disastrous incident at the wedding, law enforcement officers began interrogating people. Kat and I attended the wedding but stated that we left when the chaos began out of concern for our health. During the interrogations, we kept a calm expression on our faces. When the detectives left, we couldn't help but laugh. We never heard from them again. Reggie Boy decided to sue the supplier, but S had already left town to avoid paying the court. As far as we heard, he fled to Italy, to his homeland. What happened to him after that is unknown. Reginald Pennington IVTH was caught in bed with someone else's wife less than a year into their marriage. Unfortunately for Reggie, her husband caught them in the act and was unhappy. He immediately called Maggie to inform her of the situation. When she arrived at her offended husband's house, she had some kind words for Reggie. Soon after, Maggie appeared on the doorstep of our new home. As a result of the resulting chaos, Reginald lost the ability to engage in intimacy. It became clear that although she herself did not object to infidelity, she did not want to tolerate her husband's infidelity. A bit of a double standard, don't you think? Kat and I moved into a more spacious house, as her small 2-room apartment was no longer enough. Our new abode is a spacious 4-bedroom ranch-style house. By the end of the first year, I managed to pay off half of the debt. It became clear that Reggie Boy had convinced Maggie to sign a prenuptial agreement according to which if she filed for divorce, she would get only what she brought into the marriage. Despite the fact that Maggie still continued to work for $155,000 a year, she would not have left with billions. A year had passed when we were woken up by a knock on the door. Kat, who was 4 months pregnant, gave me a quick kiss before I hurried to open the door myself. Maggie was standing on the other side, crying. "What do you need, Maggie?" I asked. "I'm really sorry, Mac." "I'm sorry for everything," she said with tears in her eyes. "Hey, you were the only one who wanted to move on," I replied casually. "What happened?" I asked. "I found out that Reginald was cheating on me," she confessed through sobs. "Well, that's unfortunate," I said dryly. "Mac, I'm truly sorry," she stopped in mid-sentence when she noticed a pregnant cat approaching me from behind. "Who is this?" Kat came up to me with a smile and asked, "Who's there?" pointing to the door. "This is Maggie." "She was just leaving," I replied sharply, closing the door in front of my ex, locking the bolt. I turned to Kat and pulled her to me. "She is the past, you are my future." "I love you, honey," I whispered. "I love you too, baby," Kat replied, pressing her lips to mine. We got married shortly after we found out that Kat was pregnant, and at her suggestion, we chose a small civil ceremony. Now we are officially husband and wife, and Maggie is struggling with overshadowed depression and a cheating husband. She will not decide whether to tolerate her husband's infidelity or remain a beggar, but that's not my problem anymore.